All right, I noticed that it is 7 p.m. on December 15th, 2020. I welcome you to the Bourne Board of Selectmen workshop. Note this meeting is a video conference via Zoom. It is being televised, streamed, and recorded by Bourne TV. If anyone in the public wishes to gain access to the meeting, they can do so by accessing Zoom or by calling the conference line at 1-929-205-6099. And for the phone and also for Zoom, the meeting ID is 848-4511-2743 with the password 742673. If you didn't catch all of that, it is on the agenda on the town website. If you go to the Town of Bourne website and go to the calendar, you will see the agenda with that information. Participants wishing to speak should click the participants icon in the lower toolbar and then click raise hand in the dialog box to notify us. And then I will recognize you and we will unmute your microphone so that you can speak. For participants who are calling into the meeting and wishing to speak, they should press *9 to notify us that you are interested. All items within the meeting agenda are subject to deliberation and vote by the Board of Selectmen. I'd like to call into public session to order to open session. I'd like to introduce the Select Board for the Town of Bourne. I'm Judith Froman. I am the chair of the board. We have James Potter, who is the vice chair, George Slade, who is the clerk, Peter Meyer, who's a member, and Jared McDonald is excused this evening. I'd like to take a moment of silence for our troops, our public safety personnel, and our public health professionals. Say the pledge to the flag, salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance. Whoops, don't see it yet. Waiting for the flag to show up.
It's not there this time.
Oh, it's not? Okay. I'll have to go run out to the front of my building. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Carol Ellis, for the flag. Our recorder does a fine job keeping us in line. I'll read the vision statement. Bourne is a proud community that embraces change while respecting the rich heritage of the town and its villages. It is a municipality based on strong fiscal government with a durable economy that recognizes the rights of all citizens, respects the environment, especially the coastal areas of the community, and the amenities that it affords. Bourne embraces excellent education and offers to citizens a healthy, active lifestyle. Jim Potter will read the mission statement.
Okay, we got a fancy system tonight. Chair, Bourne will maximize opportunities for social and economic development while retaining an attractive, sustainable, and secure coastline and environment for the enjoyment of residents and visitors. Through responsible and professional leadership and in partnership with others, Bourne will strive to improve the quality of life for all residents living and working in the larger community.
Thank you. At this point, we're at agenda topic number 5, which is the public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone who has any comment? Okay, seeing none, we will continue. Welcome to the Select Board's workshop on the proposed multi-purpose machine gun range. There was a public notice that was put out to the town of Bourne for discussion. We're encouraging residents of Bourne to participate. We provided the presentation and information in advance. I want to give you an idea of the plan for this evening. First, we will have the Colonel Matthew Porter and Major Alexander McDonough present from the Massachusetts Army National Guard. Their presentation that was part of the agenda. All materials can be found on the Town of Bourne website. Following the presentation, the board will deliberate and have a question answer time with the National Guard team. All questions and answers will be documented in the meeting minutes that will be reviewed in January. We asked for questions in advance and did pass those questions on to Colonel Porter and his team. That was actually very helpful so that they would know what our concerns were. We will open the discussion to the public following the board's initial discussion. The Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod will speak. They've asked, and then we will have the residents of Bourne ask their questions. Please listen very carefully to the whole presentation so you know if your questions have been answered, because there's a lot of material to cover. Logistically, we will not be using the chat feature this evening, so don't send us messages that way. During public discussion, please use the participation icon in the lower toolbar and raise hand. We will keep a running list and call on individuals. There's a 2-minute maximum on public questions. Then at the end of the workshop, we will have a final discussion with the board and the Army National Guard members. All right. I would like to pass the microphone over to Colonel Matthew Porter and Major Alexander McDonough.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Froman. I appreciate it. And Mrs. Schiavi, I appreciate the invite. My name is Colonel Matthew Porter, and I'm the Camp Edwards Base Commander. So what I really would like to do is introduce my force. So I have Alex McDonough, Major Alex McDonough.
He appears to be frozen.
Okay, I was gonna say, I'm sensing we're frozen right now. We'll let it catch up.
Looks like they dropped off. We'll see if he comes back in.
Oftentimes that rebooting helps. Otherwise, we'll pick one person from the crowd to be able to do the presentation. How's that? Who's going to be that lucky person? Recognize Jake McCumber.
Good evening. I think while we wait for Colonel Porter and Major McDonough to come back on, the rest of the team that is here, we can introduce ourselves.
That'd be great, thank you.
I'm Jake McCumber. I'm the Natural Resources and Training Lands Manager for the Massachusetts Army National Guard. And my program is based at Camp Edwards. Because of the dynamics of passing the mic back and forth here. We also have Keith Driscoll, who is the Massachusetts Army National Guard's NEPA and MEPA coordinator, which is the National Environmental Policy Act and the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. We have Matt McKay, who is the compliance manager for Camp Edwards in the environmental program. And we also have Mike Sarenka, who is the director of the Environmental and Readiness Center, which is a key interface between the training activities and environmental activities. And now it looks like we do have Major McDonough and Colonel Porter back.
Thank you, Jake.
Yep. Apologize for that. Our computer looked like it froze. Did you get all of Colonel Porter's introduction?
We did not.
I introduced the rest of the
I'll
team.
back over to him real quick.
Yes, the team has been
Okay. Well,
the team has been introduced.
Introduce. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to Alex. I just want, the only thing really of any importance is we took a lot of time in answering these questions. If there's any additional requests, certainly we're happy to answer those. And what we've done is embedded a lot of the questions within the briefing and answered it as completely as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alex McDonough, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
So on the administrative side, before we get started, I'd like to ask Jake if he could share his screen. Looks like my computer froze. I popped onto my secondary communication device, my phone, in the Zoom meetings. Jake?
How do I do that here?
You should have a share icon.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that.
All right. All right. Well, first off, apologize for that administrative delay. Again, my name's Major Alex McDonough. I'm the Plans and Training Officer for Camp Edwards, and today we'll be giving a briefing on the Weapons Qualification Range, or better known as the MPMG, located in the Camp Edwards Training Area, Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve. Slide, please. So the area we're talking about, to just put it in context, so we have two maps on the screen for you. The image to the right in the green outline shows the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve in reference to the rest of the training area. That's a 15,000 acre piece of land that incorporates all the maneuver space and live fire ranges that the Massachusetts Army National Guard utilizes for its training. The image to the left shows highlighted in yellow all of the existing and historic live fire ranges located on the installation. And this image was used as part of the analysis when we were trying to determine the best place to put the range. If you look at the image in the southern end, you see a long, narrow range. That is the area we'll be focusing on today. That's the old known distance, or KD range, which is where the MPMG was cited for as the top location for this project. Slide, please. So before we talk about the range itself, we really like to go into how we got here and the rules that we're under here at Camp Edwards. So those that are familiar with the base are familiar with Chapter 47 of the Acts of 2002. That is the law that established the Environmental Management Commission and set the environmental performance standards for Camp Edwards. The environmental performance standards are 19 specific rules that the installation needs to follow to ensure environmental protection and protection of the water supply. These are the rules that we work with the environmental officer, Len Pinot, and the three commissioners to move forward with any training requests, not just ranges, but any type of training we review with the commissioners and Len. So within the EPSs, EPS 19 is the most important standard when it comes to live fire, range fire. And the main tenets of that environmental performance standard is to capture, contain, manage, monitor, and report the use of ammunition on that range. So when we do propose a range, we go through this process with the Environmental Management Commission, where we meet with two advisory councils, the Science Advisory Council and the Community Advisory Council, present what we'd like to do, get feedback. In many cases, we take that feedback back and refine our plan, represent, and then the presentation moves to the Environmental Management Commission, who makes a vote on whether our plan is approved or whether we need to refine it. What we'll do and what happens with ranges or ammunition approval is the commission will approve the environmental officer to approve the range design and work with the base to create an operations, maintenance, and monitoring plan, which is essentially the rules for how the range is created, monitored, and maintained. Next slide. So moving on to what is a multi-purpose machine gun range. This is a range that is used to zero and qualify soldiers on automatic weapons. It uses a variety of stationary infantry targets, moving infantry targets, and stationary armor targets in predetermined locations to assess whether a soldier can successfully identify and engage that target. These targets are run off of a computer program that exposes the targets as part of a course of fire, and based on the number of targets the soldier engages, determines whether they meet the Army's qualification standard. Currently on Camp Edwards, we do not have a range like this to meet that qualification requirement. So soldiers have to go elsewhere to meet this annual training requirement. The image to your right shows the current funded project for this range. This would create a range for 8 lanes up to 800 meters that would enable soldiers to qualify on the M249 light machine gun and the M240 Bravo medium machine gun. Future designs that are unfunded would enable use of the 50 caliber machine gun when copper ammunition is available. Next slide, please. So that is what an MPMG is. How do we get to determining what the requirement is? The Army uses an analysis based on the force structure of the Mass Army National Guard and units that come to training on the installation that determines how many range days or how much time is needed for soldiers to qualify on a particular range or weapon when they come to train here. That number then informs our planning team on what range we think we can, we determine what we need, and then we do analysis based on the size of the range, the surface danger zone or the probability of round escapement, and an environmental background on determining whether the range is even feasible. then we go forward and request funding. And this particular range was funded. So we proposed this range in fiscal year 2012. We were notified in 2012, 2013 that we were going to be awarded this project. The total cost of the project is 11.5 million, 9.7 of which is the actual range construction, 1.8 million is the targetry. With that, Jake's team got mitigation funds for mitigating the impact of this range. So far, what's been executed is 748,000 with 1.7 million contingent for future projects based on this MILCON. The anticipated project schedule, the project hasn't started yet. It's pending the final legal review of the range itself. So that has pushed the start date to the right, but the project itself will take 2 years to complete. Next slide, please. So in terms of location, as we said before, it's located at the former KD range. The image to your right is the actual image of the design for the range. So the current acreage for KD range is about 40 acres, 30 of which is where the impact, where the footprint actually will be for this range. The reason for a lower amount of footprint used is we actually, in the planning process, decided to move the range further north to mitigate concerns about noise impact for the local community. The current project, as it stands now, will disturb 100 acres, 10 acres of fire breaks, so 140 acres total for total disturbance of the area. There is a future project that we'll show on the next slide. Could you flip it over? That is currently unfunded, so we don't have an idea of when this project would necessarily be awarded, but it creates 2 lanes out of the 8 that go up to 1,500 meters, and that would disturb 71 acres for a total of 211 acres. Next slide, please. So what you see here are the 2 weapon systems that what we'd use on the MPMG range as designed currently. The image to the left is the 249 light machine gun that fires 5.56 millimeter rounds. And to the right is the 240 Bravo medium machine gun, which fires 7.62 millimeter rounds. All rounds fired from both these weapons are the enhanced performance round, which is the copper round. We will not fire any lead rounds on this range. Next slide. So when it comes to community outreach, the Massachusetts Army National Guard has worked with the Science Community Council, the various towns in the area, and has been briefing this from basically 2012 all the way to today. Really, once we knew we were going to get awarded the range, we started letting the SAC and the CAC know that it was coming. And as we got more fidelity on what the design would look like, we provided more information. This really was highlighted in 2018, where we gave a very detailed briefing of the MPMG range to the SAC, CAC, and EMC on what the range is. The image in the upper right is from our training support center, where soldiers go to prepare for qualifying on this range by firing virtually at essentially a computer screen. Next slide. So in terms of regulatory milestones, we have worked with all our partners before the timeline that's posted on the slide, but officially starting for the National Heritage Endangered Species Program in January 2018, and concurrently to this day. There are two environmental policies that we go through, which is the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, which is MEPA, where we went through that process to notify the state of what we're planning to do, and then the National Environmental Policy Act, which is where there was a lot of public interest in the public comment period for the project. Next slide. So the next part of this brief goes over 5 topics that we found when we initially went through the public comment and some of the concerns about the range itself. Back on. Thank you. That we wanted to just highlight to address off the top. So one of the first concerns was location. And that's 2 parts. Why Camp Edwards? And then why the Katy Range itself? So for, oh, sorry. Am I unmuted? Yep, okay. Massachusetts Army National Guard soldiers are required to qualify on their crew served weapons annually. The availability of the ranges in the surrounding area is very limited, and the ability for units to accomplish their training goals has really been diminished for years in terms of what we've been able to accomplish. So when a unit has to split or travel to either Ethan Allen or Fort Dix or Fort Drum to go to one of these ranges, they're losing days at a time to meet their qualification requirements. This is time that could be spent on other tasks that soldiers are required to complete in order to meet the Army standard for training, for both individual training and what we call collective training together as a team. The Massachusetts Army National Guard is extremely limited in the time that we have with our soldiers. So any time that we can cut to meet that training goal is what we're really looking to accomplish. Second is the Katy Range for site selection. As you can see from the map in the lower left-hand corner, there are really, after we did the geographical analysis, there are only really 2 locations that were viable for this type of range. One is the Katy Range, and the second range was Sierra Range, which is where our 300-meter rifle qualification range is located. When you take that into account, it's extremely impractical to tear down one range, lose a training capability to build another range. You're not really gaining anything by doing that. Next slide. I'll next turn it over to Jake, who will cover the habitat impacts. Can you turn it on slides? I can't. Jake?
Thank you. Good evening. So with this project relative to natural resources and environmental considerations, the context is really important. You already heard a little bit about the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve and the Environmental Management Commission. So that's one of our fundamental building blocks and sets a lot of the boundaries for us. So with that, we have priority placed under Mass General Law on the wildlife habitat and groundwater quality. So that really sets the initial bar, as I mentioned, for our planning. We're not going to take a project to the Environmental Management Commission for review and approval that can't demonstrably meet those requirements of the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve. So we build that into our planning, even for these large projects. And a large part of how we do that is we have dedicated environmental staff working for the Massachusetts Army National Guard. Several of us are on this call. For the natural resources side of things, we have our own natural resources conservation program for the Massachusetts National Guard, and we're actually based at Camp Edwards because it's our primary training site and our dominant natural resources focus. So we have a very proactive, well-trained and dedicated conservation team focusing on ensuring that we have sustainable Army training so that we can provide the best possible Army training at Camp Edwards while also setting the bar regionally for conservation management of wildlife habitat and rare resources in our Pine Barrens ecosystem. And we do quite well with that. And our guiding document is our integrated natural resources management plan. The integrated portion of that is that notion that it takes in all of the training needs, all the climate change threats, the other state conservation plans, and all of the management actions we need to do. And it brings those together in sort of a comprehensive analysis and a long-term management plan. And we specifically partner with Mass Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the towns of Bourne and Sandwich, and the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and many other stakeholders with that planning. So this range from an Army perspective or a DoD perspective is a typical action. And we have DoD conservation to ensure that we can do that Army training, we can have those potential impacts, but make sure that it's environmentally responsible and those impacts are offset. Oh, now it doesn't, there we go. So the majority of the base is listed as priority habitat under the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. So we knew we would have to develop a conservation and management permit with the Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. We've been working with them for a couple years on that project to develop the conservation and management permit. The foundation for the CMP is to provide demonstrable net benefit for the state listed species. So that means, again, just like with the groundwater reserve, we have to be able to show that we can so sufficiently offset those negative impacts that everybody agrees that this is clearly going to be a benefit for not only the rare species, but also for their habitat, for their long-term sustainability. We received the final signatures on that conservation and management permit at the end of September this year. To achieve that, we came up with a novel solution. It was new for Department of Defense. It was new for Mass Wildlife. And we developed an on-site mitigation bank at Joint Base Cape Cod, where we can focus on Pine Barrens habitat improvement and grassland habitat improvement. Both of those are two of the really critical conservation natural communities for southeastern Massachusetts, and they're very disturbance dependent. So all of the habitat in southeastern Massachusetts is adapted to fire. Without fire, it becomes fairly hazardous as it develops, thick fuel conditions. But also without that sort of disturbance, whether it's conservation, forestry, or fire, you start to lose the habitat quality. You quickly start to lose the species that depend on it. And it grows very poorly. Here we have a lot of even-aged forests because of land use history. And these Pine Barrens habitat are in desperate need of well-guided conservation management, like what we do and what Mass Wildlife does. So that's the fundamental of this plan. In addition, there's already been 260 acres of land transferred to Mass Wildlife to expand the Crane Wildlife Management Area, and an additional 150 acres that's being transferred for grassland conservation and mitigation. In addition to that, we're setting aside forest canopy protection areas specifically for box turtles, where those are more forest set-asides than management zones. And we have several long-term monitoring requirements so that we're evaluating the impacts not only of the range development, but also of our mitigation actions and the fire prescribed burning actions that we're going to be doing surrounding this range. So we're going to have annual meetings with Mass Wildlife, looking at the results of that monitoring, the work that we've done, and working together as a team interagency to evaluate the path forward. And this is just a map looking at what that mitigation bank looks like. The orange areas are pine barrens management focal zones for mitigation. The yellow hashed area is also pine barrens, but focused specifically around the qualification range project zone. The green areas are the forest retention zones. And then the pink and the purple are the grasslands mitigation areas. So as Major McDonough mentioned, we've already spent $750,000 on mitigation implementation across fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. And that accounted for 699 acres of pine barrens habitat improvement and 152 acres of sandplain grassland habitat improvement that we've already put into place because we've developed this mitigation bank structure that allowed us to proactively do this habitat improvement before the range is even constructed.
All right. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. So moving on to the next concern that was pretty common was noise concerns. So when we started the development of this project, we recognized that there could be a noise impact, and we looked to what the standards were for the EMC, the Army, and the locality. For the EPSs, essentially what the standard is, it says use the Army noise program to determine whether you're in compliance or not. When you look at law, it excludes military usage for enforcement for any noise rules or regulations. So what we did was we went to Army Public Health Command and we asked them to do a computer model, which is what you typically do when you build the range. Once we developed the model, we went back to them and we asked them to actually come on site to Camp Edwards to conduct a validation of that modeling. We wanted to make sure that any testing, that any noise we generated was in line with that model. It did say that the range noise was what's called level 2, which is a valid location to build the range. You're supposed to consider alternatives, which we conducted while we were doing the analysis for the range. So when we did that noise study, we sent 700 flyers to the local community before we conducted the test fire. We conducted the test fire and we got 8 responses. 1 reported hearing the range and 1 reported no noise. After the study was complete, we did decide to move the range further north to further mitigate any concerns for noise, and we've committed to the EMC. Once the range construction is complete, we'll conduct additional noise analysis to determine if any mitigation is required. Next slide, please. So for water and soil quality, the EPA under administrative order number 2 required us to investigate any potential impact on the small arms ranges. What they found was that there was no impact to the groundwater from lead projectiles, and but in order to mitigate any concerns of future contamination, the Impact Area Groundwater Study Program removed around 9 million pounds of soil from past historic range use. Moving forward to current range use, all ranges have what's called an operations, maintenance, and monitoring plan. Part of that plan requires that the soils on the ranges are monitored annually, and what they do is they test the soils for any of the constituents of concern that we're looking for. And to date, there has been no impact to soil or groundwater that we've seen. All these studies you can find copies from the State of the Reservation Report and from the Impact Area Groundwater Study Program. Next slide. The last question that we got a lot of feedback on was traffic impacts to the Cape. We traditionally use ranges between the months of April and November annually, and between Friday through Saturday on the weekends. For our installation, 1 battalion size element, that's anywhere between 200 to 600 soldiers would come to the training area to actually conduct live fire training per weekend. And what we anticipate seeing is more weekends of use, but no real bump up of use, meaning that units are going to come here to meet all their training objectives instead of break off and have a diminished training impact for the weekends that they come down here. Next slide. So at this point, what we've done is we've put all the questions that were provided to us before the meeting, and just listed the questions and the answers, and we'll go through those if that's all right. So the first question we received was how many members of the National Guard traveled to the Cape each year to participate in military training at Camp Edwards? So in our answer, it's a difficult question to answer in terms of individual person coming to the base. So the Army uses a system called the Range Facility Management Support System to track installation utilization. This use is tracked by fiscal year, which is from October to September, and by soldiers trained instead of individual use. This allows the Army to see how many man days a particular facility is being used to determine what support and maintenance resources are needed to be applied. General use monthly on the base is between 1,000 to 2,000 soldiers, 1,000 in the lighter months, meaning the months before April and after November, and higher use towards the middle of the year. The attached table below is from the State of the Reservation Report. It's a publicly available document, and you can review that for additional information. So as I was saying, you look at military personnel trained and you see a total of 359,827. That would be man days for training, not individual soldiers trained. So that's the best way we can answer the question with the resources or the information that we have, the analysis that we can conduct. Next. How many members of the Guard participate in live fire small arms training by month? The numbers below show an approximate number of soldiers that have conducted live fire training by year. We took the total number of rounds expended and divided it by what a soldier needs to meet qualification standards to come up to these numbers. We don't track qualification numbers by month, but by training year. So the image below shows approximately the number of soldiers or the number of iterations that have been conducted on our live fire ranges. Next slide, please. How many small arms outdoor known distance firing ranges are currently active and available for training on Camp Edwards? There are no active or available known distance ranges for live fire training on Camp Edwards. There are currently 5 active small arms ranges at Camp Edwards. So the Katy range that currently is located on the base is not currently active or used for live fire training. Next slide. How many firing points are part of each active live fire range? So Sierra Range, which is our M16 and M4 rifle qualification range, has 10 firing points. Tango Range, which is an M16 M4 rifle 25 meter zero range, has 32 firing points. Echo Range, the combat pistol qualification range, has 15 firing points. And India Range, which is a 25 meter zero range or a 10 meter range for cruiser machine guns, has 20 firing points. Lima Range is a 203 320 grenade launcher range for using training purpose rounds that are chalk based. Camp Edwards prohibits the use of any kind of high explosive rounds, and that has 2 lanes with 4 positions each. Next slide. Question asking all the weapons used for training purposes on current live fire ranges. Currently, the M9 pistol, M16 rifle, M4 rifle, 203 grenade launcher, 320 grenade launcher, 249 light machine gun, and the 240 medium machine gun are authorized for use. But when you look at what weapons, it's really important to look at ammunition. So when we go to approve use on our ranges, we get approval for the ammunition because that is what is placed into the environment. So we have to prove that environment, that ammunition isn't harmful to the environment. And that's what we seek to do when we meet with the Science Advisory Council, the Community Advisory Council, and get approval to incorporate that into our live fire training. Next slide. How many rounds of ammunition are used annually on the active live fire ranges? So the table below is pulled from the annual State of the Reservation report. And with this report, we have, it's important to note that Juliet Range and Kilo Range have recently been demolished. So when you see on lead ammunition use, those 2 ranges are no longer active, and there are no longer any lead ranges on the base. So any ammunition will be copper moving forward, with the exception of M9 rounds on Echo Range. Next slide, please. How often are the berms that capture the bullets fired during live fire training cleaned and purged to collect live fire bullets? So bullet pockets are inspected twice annually for bullet concentrations in the berms. There are 2 types of berms that are inspected. The first are frontal berms that protect the target lifter. The second berm is a capture berm that is unique to Camp Edwards range design. There's no other range in the Army inventory that uses capture berms the way we do. These berms are designed to capture the rounds that are fired at a particular target from specific firing points. This is the primary design element that that Environmental Performance Standard 19 requires for bullet capture. Once berms are identified as having increased risk for bullet-on-bullet impact by range control, working with the EMCAO, that's Mr. Len Pinot, the berms will be cleaned. At this time, neither Sierra Range, Echo Range, or India Range, the only earthen berm ranges in the inventory, have seen a level that requires round harvesting. All bullet traps on Juliet, Kilo, and Tango ranges have been cleaned and dismantled. Next slide. How many National Guard members are annually sent out of state for machine gun training? Again, a difficult question to specifically answer, but approximately 1,600 soldiers across 27 company-sized elements are required to fire on an MPMG to meet Army standard. This number includes the support staff required to run the range and provide logistical support to them, so food, admin, command and control, etc. All soldiers assigned a cruiser weapon need to qualify annually, must train out of state to meet Army standards. Next slide. What is the cost per person to send Guard members to an out-of-state location for machine gun training? I can't give a specific number on that, but the cost varies depending on the site soldiers travel to. The cost going to Ethan Allen is different than the cost going to Dix or to Drum. And really the currency we use to calculate in the Guard is the time that soldiers take to travel to a particular site. Next. Over the past 5 years, how many Guard members who have trained at Camp Edwards were deployed each year to serve in an active combat location? I can't give a specific number, but all soldiers that are deployed in the Massachusetts Army National Guard in support of its federal mission train at Camp Edwards prior to deployment. The training that they receive is vital to their preparedness to prepare to entry into a hazardous duty location. So every year we're supporting soldiers traveling overseas to deploy. Next. What is the cost to design and build this new machine gun range? We went over it in the brief, but 11.5 million total, 9.7 for range construction, 1.8 for targetry. Next slide. What is the annual cost estimate to maintain this new outdoor firing range? The cost varies on the use and factors such as full-time personnel to maintain the targetry, roads and grounds work on the firing line and the range floor, and materials cost for lumber, targets, and other consumables. We receive an annual budget for all of our ranges, and it isn't specific to any one particular range. Next slide. What is the source of funding to build and maintain this new machine gun range? Funding was authorized in Congress in 2015, and the Department of the Army funds all ranges. Next slide. Is there a return on investment number to justify this project? Again, soldier readiness is the currency we use to determine return on investment. That's really what the Army looks at in terms of any cost-benefit analysis. In the long term, by reducing travel, convoy fuel cost, wear and tear, and cost of use of out-of-state installations, and increasing training time, the return on investment will be assured. Next slide. How many firing points will be located on this proposed new range? 8 firing points. Next slide. Lists the weapons that will be used for live fire training on the machine gun range. So the current funded project will just use the M249 and M240 Bravo. For the future unfunded extension up to the 1,500 meter range, the M2 and Mark 19 pending the development of a compatible round and a review by the EMC. We will never fire a round that isn't approved and shown and demonstrated to be safe for use on the Upper Cape water supply. Next slide. How many rounds of ammunition are estimated for use at the machine gun range on an annual basis? Based on current alignments, approximately 305 soldiers require the use of this range. This number is expected to increase over time as units that travel to other installations would travel to Camp Edwards to meet their training needs. As units realigned to Camp Edwards, the number of soldiers who would utilize this range is anticipated to increase to 1,000 or more. On a typically busy weekend, Camp Edwards hosts approximately 2,000 soldiers training on the installation. This happens once a month during peak training months, March to November. Once the proposed range is complete and operational, the number of training events is anticipated to increase to 3 weekends per month from April to November. As currently constituted, each soldier requires 592 rounds to meet qualification requirements. Based on current alignments, the minimum anticipated ammunition Use is 180,560 rounds annually with an anticipated maximum ammunition of 361,120 rounds. However, with the anticipated increase to 1,000 soldiers or more, ammunition use would vary from a minimum of 592,000 rounds to a maximum of 1,184,000 rounds annually. Next slide. How often will the berm that captures fired machine gun ammunition rounds be cleaned and purged? Berms will be inspected as described in the operations maintenance monitoring plan that is written by the installation in cooperation and approved by the EMC EO. The same procedure as is conducted on Sierra Range will be followed. Next slide. What additional environmental testing is planned to protect the Cape single source aquifer? We are required to comply with Chapter 47 in the environmental performance standards prior to being authorized to conduct live fire training. In order to meet this requirement, all active small arms ranges operating under an operations maintenance and monitoring plan. The OMP requires that the soil and groundwater be monitored on a regular basis. When the MPMG range is complete, baseline soil and water samples are taken to measure baseline concentrations of constituents of concern. Next slide. How many additional Guard members are estimated to travel each month to the Cape to participate in live fire machine gun training? The Army National Guard typically conducts live fire training from March through November annually, with the highest use focused in June, August, September, and October. Between 1,000 and 2,000 soldiers train at Camp Edwards monthly. Next slide. What will this proposed range be used by any other group, civilian or other state National Guard members, or be limited exclusively to trained members of the Massachusetts National Guard? The MPMG is designed to meet Army training standards and would be available to units outside of Massachusetts. It will be available to all uniformed members of the DoD, Homeland Security, and local and federal law enforcement. Next slide. If other groups are allowed to use the machine gun range, will they be charged a usage fee? Any organization that is not aligned with Camp Edwards is charged a usage fee to reimburse for maintenance and personnel costs. The Army National Guard uses unit alignments to determine funding levels. So if units aren't aligned with the installation, we need to recover the cost to meet maintenance shortfalls. Next slide. Regarding the Mark 19 grenade launcher, is it in the list of training weapons for this project? The Mark 19 is not currently planned for use on the range. Mark 19 record qualification require 2 lanes that are planned to be extended to 1,500 meters. If this future expansion is funded, and if the Army has in its inventory a training purpose round, chalk-based, not high explosive, that is found to be compatible for use in the northern training area, the Army would request that it be added to the authorized ammunition list. And I just want to emphasize here, we look at ammunition types, not at the weapon itself. We look at what's put into the environment. So we would have to find a round that we are comfortable with, as well as the EMC would approve, that would be compatible for use in the training area. Next slide. The maximum launching range is approximately 2,200 meters, well over a mile. Does that exceed the footprint of the range design? The surface danger zone does exceed the footprint of the range, but is contained within the impact area on the installation. What a surface danger zone is a standard safety model used by the Army that represents a 1 in 1 million probability of escapement. This model does not take into account capture berms or other geographical features of a range. All SDZs exceed the footprint of a range. So all of our ranges, all the weapons, all the ammunition that we fire create a surface danger zone, and all of those surface danger zones exceed the footprint of the ranges. Next slide. RDX is a major contaminant byproduct of the grenades. So this was more of a statement than a question, but I just wanted to expand on what I've already said. No RDX high explosive will be used on this range. All ammunition that is proposed for the authorized ammunition list requires detailed analysis and presentation to the Science Advisory Council prior to use. if it is found that the proposed ammunition would put the Upper Cape drinking water supply at risk, it would not be approved, nor would Camp Edwards ask for it to be approved. And I really want to emphasize that the staff here at Camp Edwards would never do anything that would put the Upper Cape water supply at risk, and we would not move forward with any type of ammunition or use that would violate those tenets. Next. So that was the last question. I thank everyone for taking the time to listen to us. I know it was a lot of information and we moved through relatively quickly, but we tried to do that in order to honor the time. And if you have any further questions, please let us know. I'd also encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to go to the Massachusetts National Guard YouTube page. We have a 27-minute video that goes over a lot of the information we presented today. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. That video is also on the Town of Bourne website, in the news, the Red Bar News information there. So if you're interested in checking that out. You're right. That's a lot of information to process, and really appreciate the people who were willing to pass in questions in advance, and also for the Army National Guard to be able to address the questions. So at this stage of the game, what I'd like to do is make sure that if the select board, any members of the select board have questions, then I'd like to have a little bit of discussion about those questions. I know I was trying to keep up on some of the newer information that was presented tonight that I hadn't seen before. So there may be some details that were missed, but right now, I'd like to open it up to the select board and just see who, go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question or a statement to make. I know that Peter Meyer and George, oh, go ahead, George Slade, recognize George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Major McDonough. I happened to be on that bus ride that you accompanied. I guess it was a woman from Forestdale and a woman from Bourne Village, and myself that accompanied you on that bus tour. That was very informative. But enough about that. I think you answered most of my questions related to the Mark 19 grenade launcher, and there is a possibility in the future, but if RDX is not part of that component, then I'm not going to progress on that particular item. But I was just wondering, the targets, are they placed in proximity to ground wells to be able to successfully monitor contaminants? I think there was one of the bits of information did say that there was ground well monitoring from time to time to kind of detect in advance of contamination. And I'm just wondering if they need to be down gradient of the target areas to be able to be effective in doing that.
I recognize Michael Sierra. We need to unmute you. There you go.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Slade. I can address the wells for you. Yes, there are wells in proximity to the range. Currently, we have the modelers at the Army Corps of Engineers modeling what the best locations for our firing line, mid-range, and downrange locations would be, such that we can monitor the whole of the range for groundwater concerns.
Thank you, Michael. And just one follow-up, at what intervals, or are they timed intervals where they're checked perhaps by an outside agency like DEP? Are they timed or are they random? In other words, would they just show up to
No, we would do it in concert with our soil sampling. You know, that the soil sampling is really truly the early warning system for any contamination. But again, we would set a baseline at the start, sample water and soil, if we saw any kind of trend in the soil, that would trip going and checking the wells. But we do it annually anyway. We do soil and groundwater sampling annually once established on the site.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael and Madam Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. Michael, to pick up on that, I did understand that there are annual and sometimes biannual testings of the soil. I'm thinking with the level of concern that we have in our area about the water and the quality of the water and the effect on it, are there samplings that are done more frequently? And is that something that can be committed to so that, it's not a delayed effect, like it's too late? We don't want to be too late. We
Right.
want to
So
stay on
with that, that's where the operation maintenance and monitoring plans come in, and they're very adaptable living plans. We've had them in place since 2007. We've changed the plans to adapt to that very thing approximately 17 times. So they are living documents. Each range being a different structure is prescriptive unto itself. We sampled annually. As a matter of fact, annually might even be too much, but we do that in concert with DEP, EPA, Science Advisory Council, with independent people from like MIT, et cetera. And we're currently working with them. And one of the things they suggested that we test for, so all these years we've been looking at the metals, lead, antimony, copper, for both in the soil and the groundwater, but they asked us to now start to sample for and we all looked at each other like, haven't we done this before? Sample for things that may make those mobile in soil. So if we are now looking at the whole suite of the soil chemistry, we see anything change, we pay very close attention, and anything change in the soil would trip water to be looked at. So also to give you some, anything that's on the surface as far as these metals, approximately take 1 to 2 years to get to the closest groundwater well that we can install. That's just the travel time through the soil based on past information through the Impact Area Groundwater Study Program. So yes, the early warning system is what we always are out to find, the most early warning system. So lessons learned from the past, this will be a machine gun range. Our firing line is the most concern to us now as far as soil and groundwater, because in the primer of the copper round, there's still lead and antimony. It's coming out of the inventory. So we've stopped shooting lead bullets. Lead in the primer is now coming out. But if you think about a machine gun, you get muzzle blast after muzzle blast after muzzle blast, very rapid succession, and that could create a density that falls down at the firing line. So our most critical component of this range, as I've told you, they were prescriptive, is our firing line, but we will set it up for the whole of the range.
Thank you. I recognize Jim Potter.
Madam Chair, I think Peter is before me.
Yeah, I thought so too, and I didn't see the little blue hand, so I thought you put it down. I'll call him Peter Meyer first. Thanks, Jim. You have to unmute. There we go. Thanks.
Jim, you can take my spot. A lot of my questions were already answered. I have a statement that I'll make after the fact, but you can go because you probably have stuff that hasn't been asked yet.
No, thank you, Peter. I would like to say thank you for that presentation. I did watch the video online. That was very informative. I thought tonight's presentation also covered a lot of the questions that were asked, and so a lot of answers were given. A couple of the questions I had, I think, were answered. I did have a comment about, as it pertains to the video, there was and even tonight, I think you glossed on the traffic. I don't always necessarily look at the traffic as a bad thing if it interacts with the community in a positive fashion. And so if there's opportunity for that, I would be open to that. Having travelers or visitors, or even if affiliated with the base, and if it helps the community at all, that can be an important function of the base. And so I think partnership's always a great word, because you have a lot of that out on the base already, but I think the communities can be partners as well, and sometimes that isn't looked at as much, but I think that our board makes good partners on a lot of things. So, if there's opportunities there, we are open to them. And I guess to dovetail on that, I like all the details. There's a lot of details there, and I also like the big picture. And I'm wondering if it's possible to kind of get a list of projects that maybe are anticipated out on the base. This was a project you had years in the making, and I'm sure there's other in the oven that maybe we don't know about. But I think that there's opportunity for partnership, kind of working together and understanding the needs and where you're trying to take it, because I do imagine that, as you mentioned, the other bases, and you travel now for the machine gun training, some of those other bases have other things, and it would be interesting to know, are you looking to add those here as well? And so, we're in the dark, and not for any, reason that you've created, but we are in the dark with the big picture. So some of the agencies that you do deal with are probably more in the know than we are, and then it makes it easier to communicate with our residents and visitors when we sort of know the big picture as well. So that's just a comment, and I hope that maybe we can work together some more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have one question about the fact that the September 7th, 2020 was the end of the public comment. And so here we are having this discussion, and I appreciate you being willing to entertain this at this stage of the game. Is this an ongoing dialogue, or is this a done deal, written in stone stage of things?
Am I on mute or?
You're speaking.
Okay.
I hear you. Thank you.
So yeah, right now the public comment period has ended, as you just stated. The National Guard Bureau is finalizing the review of the public comments, and our hope is that they'll find a finding of no significant impact, and we can therefore move on to the construction portion of this project. So
EMC review.
Well, the EMC review, correct. They would review it, and then it would the construction onto the project. So I would say we're definitely in the late stages. And that is, really at this point, we're really trying to improve some communication that came to light. We thought the communication was going along fine. That obviously is not the case. So we're trying to improve using Zoom, using different methods to engage the different communities to make sure that the information that we thought was getting out is actually getting out.
Thank you. It is fascinating. There are many different types of organizations and actions around with governmental organizations that people who are working on it. I mean, we find ourselves engrossed in this also. That we're engaged. We're doing the background work. We're trying to get everything lined up. We open it up to the public and for comment and communication. And I can't stress that the amount of communication that's necessary to put forward ideas and projects is really critical. And all of us need to be much better about trying to engage the public during the process when it seems like it can actually make a difference in terms of projects. So that goes with other types of committees and boards that we're on also. So I'm wondering, is there a possibility of a memorandum of understanding at all with the town of Bourne and the various communities that abut the Camp Edwards regarding, a number of the things that you talk about that are sound great, sound okay right now, but you know, as they change and as things evolve, how do we stay informed? How do we continue, like what Jim was saying, to be able to have more of a proactive dialogue and also accountability in terms of changes in ammunition. And I know that the Science Advisory Council is part of that. I'm not exactly sure who's on the Science Advisory Council. think that's one detail I've missed, but so my question is about the Memorandum of Understanding.
Right. And I guess we can look at a number of different ways that that make people more comfortable. But I will say, like, for instance, the EMC, the Science Advisory Council, the Community Advisory Council, those are all public meetings that everybody's welcome to attend. And I think those would be helpful in increasing the understanding and information. Like I said, this information has been briefed for many, many years, and in great detail as well. It's just unfortunate now that a lot of people don't attend some of these meetings in person, and some of it is lost and the opportunity is lost. So we're trying to be a little bit more proactive ourselves in order to get the information out for in meetings such as this, and probably, you know, revising when we do our selectmen briefs. I know we didn't have them this year because of the COVID, but taking the opportunity to maybe revising it and you know, looking at different areas that we know, for instance, that was just brought up with to what projects are on the horizon. And I think we focused a lot of big picture stuff, but it is clear to me anyways that some of the more details might need to be you know, addressed there, and maybe a little bit more lengthy of a briefing instead of a single agenda item amongst many agenda items. Maybe we need to have a meeting such as this where, you know, we are the primary focus. In the past several years that I've done those, we've only gotten a few minutes to brief, but I think the public wants more detail. So I think if we got a little bit more time in those meetings, I think we'd be able to get a lot more across.
I do think it would be also helpful to have I know it's in your information, but a listing of those various councils, like the Science Advisory Council, and, you know, who are the members on those different types of committees, and what all the alphabet soup, what all those committees stand for. And I just think that would be helpful to our town and the area for identifying, you know, which might be the sources of where we can get some of the information.
Right. So I'll speak to Len Pinot. He might be on this call actually right now, but
he couldn't make it, sir.
Yeah, he couldn't. All right. So Len Pinot is our environmental officer. He actually speaks for the EMC, who also speak, you know, for the most part, they work. The Science Advisory Council and the Community Advisory Council are inform the EMC onto the community as well as the science. So I'd leave it to him to actually inform the towns or send out a list of who's on those committees. That is more in line with his responsibilities. We are just a member of those committees. We don't control them.
Okay. I recognized Michael Sarasanka.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to clarify something on the Citizen Community Advisory Council. The 4 towns are represented by representatives selected by the town, and our expectation was that they were coming back to the towns, and we've run into this with each town, that they would be informing the boards, their town managers, and it's one of the things that we've found out that has not taken place that has to be rectified. They're chosen by you all to represent you and should be coming back and informing you on this for the last 8 years that we've been discussing it. So it becomes frustration to us. You just need to know that your own town reps are there and not bringing it back to you.
Well, I can say George Slade has been bringing information back to us, and that's part of the reason we are having this conversation tonight. So that's it. But it is true. It's always, you know, with elected officials, there's always a change, and there's always a rotation, and always new characters on you know, on the committees. So it is important to make sure to keep stressing bringing the information back. I know I'm doing quite a bit of talking. I didn't know if are there other questions by folks on the board? I would like to, I know that we talked about a little bit about traffic and that type of thing. What I'd like to know is, have there been conversations with MassDOT in terms of their projects and their, the bottlenecking that will be happening because of improvements to the areas leading on to and off from the bridges, and also the replacement of the bridges? Has there been any dialogue with MassDOT?
Did you have something?
Yeah, I can expand on that a little.
Well, I can a little bit as far as the bottlenecking from you talking about the increased traffic from soldiers coming down here. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And
exactly.
also because of the construction. So it's a combined effort.
Right. And primarily, when we convoy down here, first you have to understand that generally units are coming down here and they're going directly to the base, generally through Bourne, over the Bourne Bridge. And that is, they're trying the best of our ability. I mean, this is generally fairly successful. We identify the best times to convoy equipment down here. So it's generally not during peak, traffic hours. We try to do it, on hours of when the traffic is lighter. Now, of course, with the construction of the bridges, that obviously is going to have an impact. It's going to have an impact on everything, I'm sure. So it is difficult to understand at this point, and probably maybe a conversation with DOT on when their construction process is going to happen and how much is going to impact the bridges that are still there. But that hasn't happened to any extent at this point, but I don't expect it'll have as much impact as people are worried about.
Thank you. Right. Seeing no other questions from the board at this point, I'd like to move on to the public and open up the floor by you raising your hand, and we would call on you so that you can ask your questions and make brief statements. I have been requested by Andrew Gottlieb to be able to speak, so I will start with him. And if any of the rest of you are interested in speaking, please raise your hand while he's talking, and we'll keep track of it and we'll call on you. I also know that Stephen Mealy from Cape Cod Commission is also interested in speaking. So, Andrew, please introduce yourself and your affiliation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board.
Having a little bit of trouble, Andrew.
The advocacy, excuse me.
Having trouble hearing you. It's bad connection.
Let me try. This. Is that any better?
It is.
All right.
So far.
Thank you, Steve Jobs. Anyway, my name is Andrew Gottlieb. I'm the executive director of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, the region's oldest, largest environmental advocacy and education organization. We have commented in the public comment process our concerns about this project. And just by way of backdrop,
Andrew, I think we're in trouble again.
We have the mitigation issues.
Andrew, I think you froze. Okay.
Is that any better, Judy?
No, we lost you for a nice segment of time. Sorry.
Yeah, I think maybe the same. Ran into the same problems that our friends at the Bays ran into. We have issued our concerns about this project in part because we're concerned that some of the lessons, positive lessons about how the base can coexist as an environmental partner with its surrounding communities seem to have been lost in the way this project has been conceived, analyzed, and managed. Things got better with the cleanup of the base when there was openness, transparency, and science-based information that resulted in the opportunity to make good management decisions. And our overall concern with this project is that the analysis that underpins a lot of the assertions that have been made, both in the environmental assessment and repeated to some degree again this evening, are predicated on an assessment that seems more like a justification of a predetermined outcome than a search for what the real issues are. And the findings that there is less than significant impact on all manners of concern, whether it's groundwater impacts, forest habitat, and other carbon sequestration and long-term carbon impacts, just is not borne out by the depth and level of analysis that's provided in the report. And because the report doesn't delve into those issues adequately, we really don't feel that there's sufficient information for the public and to perhaps the surrounding towns to make a informed judgment about whether or not this project can and should proceed, given the importance of the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve as a common resource to benefit the people of Cape Cod, and that the activities cannot be presumed not to exceed the threshold of compatible training as mandated in the establishment of the reserve. And simply because there has not been adequate management of the forest resources within that reserve, that does not justify the destruction of several hundred acres of that habitat, simply because what it has been allowed to degrade to being less robust than it should be under proper management. We are losing forest cover as a result of this project. The mitigation, as described, simply is a transfer of existing preserved lands to other stewardship. It doesn't provide additional offset of the forest lost. And it really, frankly, falls short of the kind of high-level commitment to maintaining dual objectives of environmental protection and adequate military training that has marked the last 30 years of the relationship between Cape Cod and its military neighbors. So we would really encourage a pushback on this, go back and do a more detailed environmental impact statement, look hard at those questions, and come up with real mitigation that would allow the activity that's proposed to be done, but done in a way that does not jeopardize our broader environment. And then lastly, the underlying justification for the project hasn't been made. It's talked about in the prior hearings that in front of the advisory board a few months ago, that was to cut down travel times, and yet there's no real analysis, and there was an inability tonight to be able to articulate how many soldiers are coming to the base, where they're coming from, and if driving them to Cape Cod from anywhere west of 495 actually results in any meaningful loss of lost time in transit and may in fact increase transit costs. So we really need to look at what the underlying justification for the project is and have the Guard Bureau go back and look at other locations within Massachusetts that might be appropriate for this, that are less environmentally sensitive than Cape Cod. So we're not opposed to the concept behind it. We just frankly don't feel like the Guard Bureau has made a sufficiently detailed and thorough and objective analysis of the issues at hand to come up with a reasonable management plan to mitigate what the impacts are. And once this is done, it can't be undone, and we will have lost a resource. So after 8 or 9 years, this doesn't need to be rushed at the 11th hour when the public has finally engaged. So I appreciate your board's attention to it. And we appreciate, frankly, although they probably don't appreciate my comments, the ongoing interest of our partners in the military to come up with a way to find a way to mitigate this project so that if it can be done, it will be done, but done responsibly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. I now recognize Eve Zuckov. Please introduce yourself and your address.
Sure. Hi, my name's Eve Zuckov. I'm a reporter with WCAI, the NPR station on the Cape. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. First and foremost, Fort Devens, farther out Western Mass, is also being targeted for a new machine gun range. This is directed to base officials. Can you explain to me why there's a need for 2 ranges in the state of Massachusetts if a good chunk of the justification for this range does have to do with travel time?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So the Army requirements model is the Army's method of determining what ranges, how many ranges are required. They do that based on units that would use the range, or for our particular instance, the Mass National Guard, how many units within the Mass National Guard would use a range at Camp Edwards. Fort Devens is a reserve training base, so they are host of many units as well, but including the reserves, and they would be the reserve units primarily would be ones aligned to Fort Devens. So really, the Army has determined, based on the Army requirements model, that there is a need based on the number of units that train there and that are within the general area of Massachusetts or even surrounding states, that there is a need for multiple machine gun ranges. Their range, though, it's important to know, is not anywhere near close to how far along ours is as far as design. In fact, I don't believe they've actually even entered into the design phase. I think they're still looking into the they're still working to see if it's the feasibility study for their ranges. There's also important that their range would be significantly smaller. It would not be because they have a much smaller base and a much smaller impact area, so they would not be able to fit the size of the range that we would have to be a non-standard range. And in actuality, if you compared both ranges and you put them side by side on what we're designing, what they're designing, it would really only be about one standard Army machine gun range.
Do you two work together at all, the base officials at Fort Devens?
Excuse me, Eve, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We're at the limit on the amount of time for questions. I need to move on to somebody else at this point.
It's only one question per person to be asked?
On a rotating, we'll rotate through.
Thank you.
And technically, it's supposed to be Bourne residents, but we'll carry on here. The next person is Stephen Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm the town of Bourne's representative to the Cape Cod Commission, and I'm also a past member of this Board of Selectmen, as well as a past chairman. I was a representative for the board at the time I served to work with the military to represent the town of Bourne. And I don't recall in the years that I served and was a representative that this particular project had been covered or discussed. Most of the time that I had been on the board, the discussions revolved around the cleanup. And I think one of the problems that I see is that although this project's in your presentation this evening has been around since 2012 and funded in 15, the cleanup efforts that we've watched over the last 25 plus years, and will probably go on far into the future, although they may not be related to some of the same contaminants which we faced prior to what you're proposing on this other piece of property. We have spent $1.2 billion and removed tons, as you reported this evening, of contaminated soil and lead. Now, there's nothing to say that 5 years from now or 3 years from now, we discovered that the same problems we have with water contamination due to soil contamination are a result of the operation of this particular range. And I don't think, if I can echo the earlier speaker, that the analysis and the presentation of what may be significant impacts have been really well vetted. I think the justifications I heard this evening were really justifications for saving time for soldiers, which I didn't hear really a complete analysis based on travel times with a number of soldiers and so forth. There was vagaries throughout the presentation this evening. The other statement I'd like to make is that I don't think you've really allowed proper vetting of this with the public. There's been an outcry, as there was back in 1998 when the governor first squashed a similar type of project, but we haven't really had an opportunity between what's been going on with COVID, which has really squashed a great deal of public participation on many fronts, but we really need to reach out, I think, and do a better job of this. And again, there doesn't seem to be a rush to get this done. This has been lounging now since 2012. The funding's been in place since 15. Now suddenly in 20, during the middle of a pandemic, we're going to now start construction in the middle of all this. I question why the emphasis to get this done and why not take the time. I'm one of several residents in the town of Bourne that are concerned about the groundwater. I'm one of all of the residents in town of Bourne get all of the drinking water from the Sagamore lens underneath that facility. And what I've got tonight was a presentation to tell me that don't worry, it'll be okay. We know what we're doing. And based on the last 25 years and $1.2 billion of cleanup, I'd say you kind of know what you're doing, but I'm not sure you really do. And I'm an informed member of the public, a person that has served on a board, and you haven't convinced me. So I would ask that we go back and we stop and we take the time, because it really needs to be looked at hard, because it's not your drinking water, it's ours. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, looking for other members from the town of Bourne who might have questions. Please raise your hand. I recognize George Slade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to dovetail on what Mr. Mealy had said. Yeah, we have spent a lot of time. It has been a while, but I want to be as fair as possible to the proponents here, and to say, okay, you've made your presentation, and we do have concerns. You're aware of the concerns, and I think Mr. Pinot is the next stop on this particular initiative, and I think it's going to take quite a bit of time, I believe. I don't think we're ready to go into construction. I think Major McDonough, you would refer to this starting in the fall of 2020 and not really making that deadline. But I think I'm just wondering, what is the timetable now for final vetting by DEP and the EMC to entertain this and really take what the concerns of Mr. Gottlieb as well as Mr. Mealy has just brought, those concerns, and process those and move forward on it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So in response to that question, so the next steps moving forward, so once National Guard Bureau returns the total of 900 questions that were asked during that public comment period, our understanding is that the EMC, the SAC, and the CAC will review the responses to those questions, and that will determine how the EMC moves forward with that. Obviously, I'm not part of the EMC, so I can't speak to how they would move forward, but they've indicated that they want to review those questions from that public comment period, which was around 350 individual comments consisting of 900 questions that National Guard Bureau is reviewing right now. And just quickly to touch on some of the points that were mentioned earlier, the Massachusetts Army National Guard is very committed to ensuring that we protect the water supply resources of the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve. And the range complex, I would argue, is one of the most analyzed, tested, and reviewed complexes in the Army inventory. We have, through the State of the Reservation Report, thousands of data points looking at the type of ammunition that we're proposing to fire. And to this point, we've seen no impact on lead or copper munitions being fired. So I appreciate all the comments up to this point and just wanted the opportunity to speak to that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. There are other questions from residents of the town of Bourne. Raise your hand if you're on the phone and you'd like to speak, press *9, and that will raise your hand. Just giving it a moment, just in case there's a lag time. If someone is watching on TV, there's usually a little bit of a lag time. Okay, I recognize Peter Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The problem is, and I've been around here a while, is groundwater is emotional, and because it's the sole source of drinking water and a major source of fresh water for domestic, industrial, and agricultural uses on Cape Cod. So when that's a precious commodity, of course people are going to be nervous, because without it, what do we have? And with one of the previous speakers, we talked about communication, but outreach to me has not been a strong suit. I mean, I think we need to work on that. Social media platforms, I know you have a YouTube channel, but in speaking with residents around Pecasset and Katomet, they're like, if we had a social media platform that we could have communication with the military personnel, maybe we'll feel a little more comfortable that our questions are being answered. And so I'm just wondering if as you're going back to the drawing board, that you would look to expanding your social media platforms in order to get the message out there and to let the people in the area know that they have a place where they can communicate and hopefully get some answers back.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, and we'll certainly take that. It's as we go through this process, and I've been here for probably 3 years now. It really has become pretty glaring that we have, we've kind of gone through a transition, where public meetings aren't attended as well as they probably have in the past, and from our standpoint, we really took that as, okay, well, maybe there's, a lot more confidence. And I think there is a lot more confidence, but I think that confidence, we definitely need to engage and use all the tools that we have at our disposal. And that's certainly something that we can do. We don't have endless amounts of resources, personnel, but I think we can, certainly take a look at different ways of engaging with the community as best we can.
Thank you. Okay. Any other residents of Bourne with questions? All right. I will pass this on to call on Yves Sugoff for one question, and then Andrew Gottlieb can follow that. So please keep it very brief.
Sure. Thank you for recognizing me for this. We've talked, a number of people have spoken about opportunities to speak, for the public to speak. When I go on the website right now, I look at the Community Advisory Council. The most recent meeting is from 3/14/19, that's 2019. And then for the Science Advisory Council, I believe it's actually the same date. And same thing for as far as public meetings on the website, there's nothing up there. Would you all be willing to tell us, is there a date to be scheduled for a next public meeting where people beyond residents of Bourne can ask questions and get this kind of engagement? Is that something you're planning? And if it is, can you cue us in to when we can expect that?
So we annually go and speak at all the towns on the selectmen meetings. So that's one engagement that we do annually, except for this past year because of COVID. As far as the EMC, the Science Advisory Council, the Community Advisory Council, again, those are all public meetings, but those aren't our meetings. Those are run by the EMC, the Science Advisory Council, and the Community Advisory Council. So, and there are regular meetings that are scheduled for the community to attend. Unfortunately, they aren't well attended. The community generally does not come out to those in any great numbers, which is unfortunate. And so, the opportunity is there. It's just not taken advantage of, I don't believe.
And I do think, I have some involvement with the Cape Cod Commission, and they run into this also. And I think that things get worked on, and they're not relevant until they're actually all of a sudden are relevant, and sometimes that's too late. And so we do need to keep being diligent about that. Okay, recognize Andrew Gottlieb and then Jim Potter.
I'll be brief. Thank you for recognizing me again. Two issues. One is, let's not get lulled into the feeling that this is a process problem. There are substantive analytical issues and justification for the project that still need improved information before the project should be allowed to move forward. Yes, communication could be better. This is not just a communication problem. And if it's cast off as a process communication problem, it would be done in a way to preclude the substantive issues from getting the attention that they deserve and warrant. And secondly, and somewhat out of my role here, I'm also, in my 5th term as a Mashpee Board of Selectmen. I've sat through plenty of those briefings. I don't remember ever hearing word one about this project, like my former colleague, Mr. Mealy. So if it got brought up, it got brought up in a cursory manner amidst a large and otherwise packed agenda. There was not a serious attempt to engage individual boards, let alone the broader public, in a meaningful dialogue about this project. Thank you, and I'll stop from here.
Thank you. Recognize Jim Potter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think just to circle back, and this is really important. Andrew talked about the substantive issues. I do agree, and I agree with the communication, and that's why I mentioned partnership earlier. I think the community needs to have a better understanding of what Joint Base Cape Cod wants to be or is becoming. I think that there's been quite a few years that it was ramped down, and you may be in the process of ramping up. And with this project might be one of a handful of projects that you may have proposed out there that we may not necessarily know about. And so I think for us to be able to work well together, we have to have an understanding of what Joint Base Cape Cod is going to be. There was a time, however so many years ago, that there was the possibility that we would lose the base entirely. And so I think that there's probably been a lot of steps taken to address keeping the base and defining its role, defining a new mission. So again, I think for quite a few years, it was quiet. And as we review anything that you propose, it will affect noise. It will affect our groundwater. It will affect traffic, and it's going to be scrutinized. And so it would be nice to be out ahead of a lot of those issues. And I realize you've only been here for a few years, so you can't address only what you can. But I think moving forward, that's the key component here is just an understanding of what Joint Base Cape Cod is going to become, because I think this project is critical to the groundwater. It's critical to other components, as were mentioned by other speakers tonight, but it's probably one of other projects that are anticipated or increases maybe in some of the other branches that you might not be responsible for. But I think we need to be able to understand the full story of what we're doing, so that we can react to that. We can get the public involved more and a better understanding of how we can be involved in that process, so that it's not a bad relationship. It's more of a partnership, and I do agree. I've been here for a couple years, and we've had a couple presentations, and you're right, they had a limited time frame, and I do think that based on the scope of just tonight's meeting, that they deserve their own meeting and understanding and interaction of how we can kind of learn what's going on out there and get a better understanding of where you're looking to go with the base. We don't always know that, and so if we know that, then we can raise these issues much earlier in the process, and we don't find ourselves in the middle of potentially construction. And I do understand this year is kind of an off year with the pandemic, but um, this is a learning opportunity, I think, for all of us, that we can kind of all do a better job of communication and understanding. And I would concur that it wouldn't be harmful to understand some more of the environmental issues in impact, instead of having to rush the construction. I don't think there's any harm there, just to get a better understanding of impacts and whether or not the offsets are that the balances are really there. But again, I think we can all learn something here, and hopefully we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you mentioned that the EMC, can you refresh me what the EMC stands for?
Environmental Management Commission.
Thank you. I didn't want to make up the letters there. I understand that they're going to be reviewing the 900 questions that were put forward, and that meeting would be something that is something that's open to the public. What's the best source of getting information about when their meetings are?
So the EMC meetings are published in I believe it's the Cape Cod Times. Is that correct? And Len Pinot, who is the environmental officer, will publish that in 2 weeks before.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks before, but we can certainly reach out to all the boards to let you know when that meeting is occurring as well, just to double tap it.
And those meetings are also pushed out at the Joint Oversight Group meeting that General Foe hosts, and hopefully we'll be back to a in-person meeting shortly. But those are also meetings that are sent out during that time as well.
Thank you. I think
those are open to.
I think it would be really helpful for any of the public meetings. That I know it is one extra step, but if the various towns abutting the base, their select boards could get the information, then I know we try to be pretty diligent about getting the information out, either on our website and also on social media, so that at least people can have some way of weighing in. I think it's really important, and it sounds like those 900 questions probably include some of our questions. So I recognize Keith Driscoll.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for letting me have a moment here. My name is Keith Driscoll. I'm with the Massachusetts Army National Guard. I'm the NEPA manager, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, and the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act manager. And I worked throughout the entire process for this project so far. I just want to clarify some of the maybe people don't know that this project has been in the works, as we've been saying, since early 2012 through the EMC process, the SAC, the CAC, and presented in those different forums. But we also had to follow both the federal and state environmental review processes. And that's, again, the MEPA and the NEPA process. We started the MEPA process back in the summer of 2019, where the Massachusetts Army National Guard went into the state MIPA office and sat down with them to discuss the level of appropriate review for this project, which we came up with. The appropriate level would be, the base level would be to do a notice of project change. What a notice of project change is we're tying it back to a former MIPA project that this project was once mentioned in. That project was, again, the SEIR, the Supplemental Environmental Impact Report of 2012. So fast forward to 2019, we pick up upon the initial announcement of the project in 2012. We started with a notice of project change. What that involves, it's a public process that we sent it out to different state agencies, federal agencies, EPA, DEP for the state agencies, all the local towns, all the different advisory committees, all the different councils, Cape Cod Commission. We even sent it to the APCC, the notice of project change. What we do is we request people's input on any of the impacts that we present within this document. We take their comments and then we answer them. It is up to the MIPA office to decide whether we've answered them properly or we have to go on to another level of review. The MIPA office said that they required us to go on to another level of review, which was the completion of a supplemental environmental impact report. We produced that document. Again, it's a public document, went through the public process. It was advertised on the MIPA website, which is an open forum where the public can comment on the project. And again, we sent it out to all the different people who we sent out the original notice of project change to. That entire process started in 2019 and it ended on July 7th of 2020, where the certificate from the Secretary of Executive Office of Environmental Affairs deemed that we accomplished the entire MIPA process sufficiently. We answered all the comments that we got from all these different agencies. Then we moved on to the National Environmental Policy Act process, which was the development of the environmental assessment, which again, it was another public document, very similar to the two previous documents that I just mentioned. That was also available to the public. And that received considerable lot more attention. The difference being there is we were required to put it in a local newspaper, which was the Cape Cod Times, hence all the 900 and some odd comments that we received. But that document also was sent out to the EPA, the DEP, Natural Heritage, all the different state agencies for the comment to let us know, if they agree with our analysis. And they all came back with their comments, and we answered them within the document sufficiently. And right now, as Colonel Porter mentioned, we are waiting, we're working with National Guard Bureau to go through all these 900 comments, hopefully to come to a conclusion of a finding of no significant impact. Process isn't over then, then it goes back to the EMC and it will go back, to the SAC and the CAC for their final review. They're going to consider everything that was considered, for the MIPA and NEPA process, which they've been involved within the whole time. And also they've been involved with the design too. We offered design reviews for them, 30, 60, 90, to get their input. Again, it's all in an effort to make sure that this range is in compliance with all the environmental regulations, and most importantly, Chapter 47 in the Act of 2002 and its subsequent environmental performance standards. So kind of rambled there for a second, but I just wanted to get that out there, that this wasn't, the EA process wasn't the only process that took place, where all this environmental analysis was presented to the public for their comments. So just wanted to follow up with that. You know.
Thank you, Keith. And yes, indeed, there are a lot of steps. And so right now we're getting to a point where the general public is paying more attention. And so hopefully we can get people up to speed, and we can, work together with you and, just to make the project as understandable as possible and have people catch up in terms of, where are the gaps on the questions that need to be answered, and where are the gaps on the process. So I think I truly appreciate the time and effort that this group of people have put into making the presentation and making themselves available. We can all, look back and say, oh, we should have done it this way, we should have done it that way, but here we are today, and we need to move forward. I think I have a better grasp of what the issues are. I think we have a better grasp of what who the key players are and how we need to move forward. And I would venture to guess that we also have a more solid understanding of, who are all the different commissions and committees and that type of thing that we need to be paying more attention to. We all have to take some responsibility with that. So appreciate all the work that has gone into this. I appreciate all of the work that people have taken to look at what questions you have and keep the dialogue going. So thanks for attending. And I don't know if you, Major Madonna, if you'd like to make any last statement before we close this section of our workshop, or
all I do is thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. As you said, it is a challenge to bring to the public's attention all these projects, and I know at the base we want to be good partners. And not only do we want to be good partners because that's the right thing to do, it's because unique to the Army, the Massachusetts Army National Guard are members of the community. Our soldiers, the people that work on the base, are members of the community in Falmouth, Bourne, Sandwich, and the rest of the surrounding base. So it's not like in the reserve component or the active. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, you're still there.
Just went on low battery. It's not just that we're transitory and passing through, but we are members of the community. And the last thing we want to do is do anything to harm the environment of our community, which is also your community. We've been involved, as you know, in COVID response and other missions throughout the state this year. This has been the largest activation of the National Guard in its history since World War II. And we're committed to working with our partners to move forward and make sure everyone knows. And I would ask that this board link up with your representative from the CAC and encourage them to provide you with feedback on the meetings that they attend. And if they aren't attending the meetings, to encourage them to do so, because every meeting lost covers a lot of ground in terms of what is brought forward. So we really need our members of the CAC to attend the meetings, receive the information that's presented, and give it back to you as part of the community. And I think that would be a huge benefit in solving this communication issue, in addition to the base taking a more proactive stance.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
There is a tremendous amount of information at our fingertips, and so we have to focus. So thank you. Are there any board members who have any parting comments? Okay, I recognize George Slade to unmute.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a parting thank you to them to show up and give them the presentation along with the team that he brought. I said getting this information across during the this time of year is, it might be a good time of year, actually, right before Christmas, but in a pandemic year, because a lot of people, their schedules have changed quite a bit. But there's nothing like using the correct media to get this point across. And there is ways to get across to people when you really want that to be challenged on something like this. And I think we finally found it. It may be social media. I'm not a great social media fan, but I think that has a place here. And I think we've got to look at more ways to alert people to things that are part of a larger presentation. For instance, the selectmen's meeting that we all attend, and we host the military, and he brings a contingent of people. It makes about half an hour, maybe a 40-minute presentation, and it's part of a larger medium. But when something surfaces, you almost have to wave a red flag saying this is going to affect you, or this may affect you, or if it's not going to affect you, you may think it's going to affect you. We're going to let you know about this, and you really want to pay attention. But that's not usually part of a selectman's presentation that happens every year. But thank you, Madam Chair, one more time.
Thank you. All right, so I would say that this ends our agenda item 6, which is the workshop on the machine gun range. So I'm sure there will be more conversation and more communication about this. Thank you to everyone for attending. If you're so inclined and you'd like to stick around for our item agenda number 7, we will be reviewing and voting on the intermunicipal agreement with Barnstable County related to information technology assistance. So I will now pass the baton on to Tony Schiavi. My screen's flashing all over the place, sorry. So I'm looking for Tony. There you are.
The participant list magically got shorter. Yeah, thank you. Just one thing for tonight. I know the board is aware in a number of audits, probably over a couple of years, there were some things in there related to information technology in terms of infrastructure, strategic planning, vulnerability and security assessments. And I've reached out to the county to engage them in assisting us with that effort. I think we're at a point where this is going to be very useful to the town and myself as we plan the future for our information technology needs, but also to look at our current structure and, you know, from a capital planning standpoint, staffing, budgeting. And so before you, since it is a intergovernmental agency effort, requires an intermunicipal agreement for us to be able to engage the county, which requires the Board of Selectmen's approval. And if the board approves that this evening, then I will finalize the scope of work, which I gave you a draft of on things that they'll be looking at for me in this effort, and try to get them started probably right after the first of the year. It should be about a 90-day effort before I get a final report.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Peter Meyer?
Well, I'm going to unmute everybody and see if I can get off.
Let's see if we can behave ourselves.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Nope, you're still muted.
I'll do it manually. I'm going to unmute the board members here. Okay, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this a short-term gap, or is this something that could be going on for years? Because I know from past experience, before Hans, we had Sherry Campbell, but also we had Global Data as our consultant. And even at one point, Mike Radis was our backup consultant when someone wasn't around. Mike would help us out any way he could at one time. So I just didn't know if this is going to be a short-term intermunicipal agreement, or is this something that's going to look permanent?
No, it's short term. for this particular one, but it'll inform me about, what the IT department needs to look like, whether there's opportunities for outsourcing. And so at the end of that, I'll have, some idea about, what direction we need to go, and to include moving our, systems to the cloud, and making sure that we're, keeping up with, the latest in information technology. I mean, it's the backbone of everything we do, and it's not just about email, but, all of our, different type of programs and systems that we use to run, town operations, all, as we all know, rely, in large part with information technology and that infrastructure. So, and it does need to be refreshed every once in a while, because, things change, upgrades need to be made, and so forth. So.
Other questions? Comments? Is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
I can do that.
Thank you.
We move the Board of Selectmen approve and sign as necessary the intermunicipal agreement between the town and Barnstable County as presented. And have the town administrator negotiate as appropriate the scope of work for this effort.
Say or a second.
Second, Potter.
Thank you. Discussion? Recognize Jim.
Yeah, Tony, are you gonna come back with a price of their services to us, or, I mean?
Right now, it has a not to exceed price
Okay.
of approximately $18,000 as a not to exceed. Yep.
Do you know how long of a term you were, or they were thinking they'd be involved?
Yeah, about 90 days, they thought they would have a final report. That's also listed in that scope of work. So we did put, some timelines on there. Yes.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion in a second.
Yes, we do. I was getting a message, sorry. I would like to do a roll call vote. Jim Potter,
Yes.
George Slade,
Yes.
Peter Meyer,
Yes.
Judy Froman, yes, 400. There you go. Excellent. This will be a good move.
Yes, thank you. Very good.
So we have correspondence next.
Correspondence for the 15th. There were 4 email letters that pertain to this evening's proposed weapons qualification range presentation that were received by the deadline last week and addressed to the town administrator. One was from a Nicole Graham with concerns about the range being inconsistent with a tourist area. Lyra Brennan with concerns about water quality. Susan Starkey with concerns about the findings of the initial EIS, environmental impact statement regarding the weapons range, and hopes for a more vigorous final review. And myself with a question about weapons that will be included and were included in that presentation. And that concludes the correspondence, which is also available for viewing on the town website under today's selectmen's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I believe item number 9 is to adjourn.
I move the Board of Selectmen adjourn this evening meeting.
Is there a second?
Second, Potter.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Potter,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Peter. Oh, Judy, yes. 300. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Great.
Good night. Thank you very much.